In this program, I'm going to be specifically addressing how to close the gap between Agile and management. The original program was delivered in May of 2015 for the Scrum Alliance, along with Rod Collins and Steve Denning. The full program, I'll give you the link for that at the end. The brain is wired to search for patterns, and it pays attention to anomalies, which are really just openings for change. Unless you notice you're going around in circles, it's really easy to get stuck and to find yourself repeating the same decisions and seeing the same results over and over and over again. It does help to know that traditional management cultures are really designed to keep things stable, minimize losing all that's been gained so far, and to manage known and controllable, note that, controllable risks. Decision-making relies on delegated authority by bumping decisions up the line, slowing things down. Now, one of the unwritten rules runs something like innovate, but just don't do anything different. One of my colleagues, former Ford executive Fred Simon, discovered what happens when you implement a new idea in a hierarchy, and I'm sure he's not the only one. Tasked with taking an innovative approach to designing a new car, he asked engineers to raise red flags as they were spotted instead of waiting until the end when it was a lot more expensive to fix. A lot of red flags immediately went up, so to the routine eye, this project was a disaster. Fred's boss went ballistic, so Fred shouldered the risk by having all of the engineers report to him. They became a cohesive team, and they completed the award-winning 1995 Lincoln Continental. Now, that Ford example illustrates the tendency for traditional organizations to handle problems and hurdles slowly, while Agile handles them as they show up. Naturally, tension is created when one approach is out of sync with the other. No one likes to lose the race, because it really challenges beliefs about how the world works. My name is Dawna Jones. I am the author of Decision Making for Dummies, and I also spot insights for leadership emergence and better and stronger decision making, particularly in contexts of uncertainty and, of course, complexity. Traditionally managed companies and many decision makers have a lot of fixed beliefs based on what's worked in the past, and that drives decisions down familiar ruts. The standard Wall Street boilerplate disclaimer remains true but largely forgotten. That is, that past performance is no guarantee of future results. On top of that, when fear is used as a management style, it has the effect of narrowing your field of view and blurring vision. What do you focus on? The customer? The shareholder, engaging employees, quarterly results, the longer term, all of it? Traditional management mode is to control everything, including uncertainty. But controlling uncertainty is like trying to control the weather. Instead, real advantage is gained by iterating and co-creating, by leveraging healthy relationships between customers and employees. Shareholders gain. Or we're actually balancing use of linear to more of a holistic thinking approach, a system-wide thinking approach. But this is the one area where it does make sense to go linear. So by leveraging healthy relationships between customers and employees, if this, then shareholders gain. This is the edge Agile brings when used well. But the company can't gain from the value Agile brings without a strong bridge between the two very different approaches. Until that bridge is built, here's how your brain sees uncertainty and how Agile and what Agile represents to traditional management cultures. Because technology innovation is a big driver of change. Well, that's a good thing. But technology equals disruption. Well, that's a threat. Well, why? Well, because disruption equals uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers executive brain function meltdown. Now, executive brain function meltdown doesn't refer to the meltdown of all executives. It refers to the executive functions that the prefrontal cortex handles, which includes the capacity to weigh risks, conduct cost-benefit analysis, handle ambiguity, and access short-term memory, for example. It's true for all of us. The good news is that we can use brain science to use our brains better and avoid building a bridge that leads to absolutely nowhere. Uncertainty is one trigger that activates the part of your brain dedicated to immediately getting you out of trouble, which is the flight or fight part of your brain. Knowing this helps because then you also know that decision-making will be impaired because your executive brain functions are offline while resources are reallocated to keep you safe. Your prefrontal cortex, where your higher order thinking and decision-making is done, is pretty much left waiting at the bus stop unless there's high trust in the workplace. I'm going to give you some of the common causes of executive brain function meltdown. 4 conditions. 1, be faced with uncertainty in low trust environments, which instigates the fight or flight instinct. 2, shut down emotionally. That reduces executive brain function because the resources that you would use in executive brain functioning are being used to repress your emotions. 3, not get enough sleep, which shuts down executive brain functions just because there's not enough sugar to run the show. And 4, being in an environment of low trust because you can't grow and protect yourself at the same time. Neither can the company. As a result, rational decisions just simply aren't rational, as you can see by this epic fail. The negative tension can create a real futile we-they dynamic that undermines the value you can more productively apply to achieving the company's goals. Now, how can you use that negative tension between Agile and traditional management to advantage? You redirect negative tension toward constructively tackling business issues together. Applying that potential inside the company to tackle a shared goal like grow the company or delight the customer, a goal that you share and care about is exceptionally important because the caring is what gives you the energy, what gives you the fuel. So you can use brain science strategies, along with others, to communicate and build the relationship between Agile and traditional management. The next 2 cognitive brain science strategies take disciplined self-leadership to consistently apply until it's automatic. First one of those, focus on toward goals, on positive goals. Traditionally managed companies frame goals around what to avoid, like cutting costs. When you're stressed, or the company is stressed, your brain and the collective brain of the company is looking for threats, things to avoid, in this case, cost. Goals framed as something to avoid are interpreted as threatening, and the focus is on surviving, not on growth. Coping kicks in. The collective brain then focuses on giving you what you say you don't want, costs. By flipping the goals you share with management into positive toward goals, you pivot the conversation and can develop growth-oriented strategies to really engage contribution. As a practical step, frame your project goals as something management wants to move toward. Brain science research tells us you'll see sustainable, faster results in half the time. And a second practical step you can take is to talk to your CFO, for example. I mean, you could talk to someone else, but talk to your CFO to identify a shared goal that you can reframe as a positive toward enabling growth rather than controlling costs. Discuss how you can contribute to growing revenue by increasing value for the customer. Reframing the language in positive shared goals engages a growth-oriented environment and decisions. Second thing you can do is use emotions as data. Now, emotions permeate everything we do, again, because we're human. It's just in workplace environments, we pretend they don't exist, and we also pretend they're not relevant. The idea that the best decisions are rational and cold, devoid of all emotion, is absolutely delusional because it ignores the fact that we are, in fact, human. Subliminal biases then operate without being noticed, and so does a ton of high-speed information processing that's automatically plugged right into all of your decisions. By ignoring or suppressing emotions, then, you miss key signals that are essential to success. Now, I explain how your information processing speed works inside your body's hard drive in Chapter 5 of Decision Making for Dummies. Now, how does this apply? Well, teams fall into ruts, which can be frustrating. Yes, retrospectives gather what worked and what didn't, but during a project or in rebuilding trust, it's better to handle frustration in the moment to be most effective. Practical step, take your meetings on a walk or take yourself on a walk. Give yourself a break, preferably in nature, so you can really get those brainwaves to slow down and regain calm and therefore control of your decision-making faculties. From there, you can reboot your conversation for more productive results, and the super big bonus is your short-term memory will improve because the energy that's going to suppressing your emotions can now be reassigned to remembering what exactly happened. So now what I'd like to do is bridge over to talk about how you implement, how you use these tools and skills to implement anything, but in particular to activate agility, whether it's to shift from one mode of operating to another mode, to one set of skills to another set of skills. The first one is focus. Focus is a very quiet influence. It's the difference between being right every step of the way to getting it right in the end, from being on time or on budget to exceeding customer expectations. It's like trying to get the water temperature right in the shower. A fraction of a turn too far and you're scalded, but a fraction the other way and you're an icicle. But it can be done. To illustrate focus, I'll use a story from Ford. Ford has always traditionally focused on engineering goals like cost, weight, and durability, internal goals. But the very first program manager, Lou Veraldi in Ford, brought together people across functions, interdisciplinary, breaking it out of its traditional silos. He created Team Taurus, which was a cohesive team. Because he wanted to make the Taurus a commercial success, he redirected the conversations toward the customer experience. He'd say to the engineers, "Tell me something about this design you're proud of." When an engineer would report on the electrical output of an alternator, he'd ask the engineer, "How will this affect the total experience of the car for the customer?" The vibration, for instance. That line of questioning led to all sorts of engineering innovations. So although it seems like a slight, insignificant shift, it makes a huge difference to what decisions are made and how teams perform. I'd like to think that every traditional company has a success story in its archives, one that offers an experience from the past that you can use to build a better bridge between the past and what's needed today. A shift in focus is so subtle that when it's done without being aware, it's not repeatable except by accident. So what you can do then is to apply a principle for decision making, which could be, how will this change, feature, component, fill in the blank, affect or improve the customer experience? That has the effect of stimulating collective intelligence because it serves as a common anchor. Executives and managers benefit from knowing that focus applies across organizational levels as well. For instance, if a company is focused solely on profit, cost accounting is used, which limits growth. If a company is focused on achieving wider benefit and more inspirational purpose, accounting switches toward the math that supports growth. What a company is focused on also changes how employees are treated, whether risk is avoided or used for innovation and adaptive agility, amongst other things. Now, these next three skills that I'm going to cover sound deceptively easy, but they are anything but when you apply them to situations where your habits and the collective habits of relating to one another are deeply ingrained. Real serious leadership is required because to redirect the negative tension to constructive purposes, you really have to break your own habitual communications out of a rut. You have to hack your habits. And by that, I mean you have to use some creativity, the ingenuity to stop, and instead of taking the usual direction, insert a different approach. Break out of those decision-making ruts by being curious. This means inserting a question you would normally add a response. So question everything that's viewed as obvious. Instead of reacting, use a powerful question so you can open up the conversation. Yeah, I know it's not easy to do, but it is necessary for change to occur. What difficult conversations do we need to have? Or what business problems can we solve by working together? How does this impact the customer's experience? Asking questions your mind can't answer helps draw out both the intuitive and creative insight. And it's obviously not a bad idea to practice it on yourself first, so that when you're in the moment, it's a little bit easier, it's a little more natural and easy to do. Second, step back to gain a new perspective. The electrical output of an alternator can seem like the most important thing in the entire world, for example, but like your project, it's really one part of a bigger picture. Micromanaging is a signal to step back and see where you're all going so you can interpret the data differently or initiate a completely different conversation and see things anew. See what you can't see at the moment because the focus is too narrow. Balance the shorter view with the wider and the longer view. The next thing you can do is discover the opportunity in constraint, as these 28 women in a mini did. Stuck teams or organizations or companies need a boost in order to move forward. Creativity might seem soft and squishy, but it's absolutely necessary if your team is stuck or feels constrained. Constraints like not enough money, time, or resources beg for a different approach. The time box, for instance, creates the parameters for higher creativity. How can we do more in less time? When Pixar went to its staff to get ideas on how to contain the budget for making a movie, staff volunteered ideas that far exceeded the original goal. Any video game players listening know the value of limits for raising the bar on your personal accomplishment. You rise above constraints by engaging your collective creativity. Now, fear also plays a role. The question is, what role will you let it play? Feeling constrained can push fear front and center. Fear of failure, fear of project failure, all sorts of things like that. But you choose how you use it. So fear can seize up creativity, it can freeze everything, and the response then is to quickly try to control the uncertainty. But the alternative is to keep one eye on the goal and proceed with caution. That way you keep control. Fear used intentionally then helps you proceed slowly when the situation gets overly complex. Growing or effectively responding to tension, constraints, uncertainty, or complexity in your workplace environment starts with the fundamental decision to do things differently, eventually creating a tipping point. This way, collective leadership can lead to a result that benefits everyone: customer, team, management, and ultimately the shareholder. It ends up being a healthier organization all around. To see the full program, the original program that we did with Rod Collins and Steve Denning, Jay Goldstein, and Michael Pakanowski for the Scrum Alliance, head over to the link below where you'll also find several of the other webinars on this conversation, particularly focused on closing the gap between Agile and traditional management mindset. Please contact me or connect to me on LinkedIn, or contact me if your company, your organization, your team is ready to make the jump and hack its decision making to find those openings, identify those insights where you can begin to work forward together on tackling the company's larger goals. My name is Dawna Jones. Thanks for joining me.